Good evening, and welcome to Atheist History Week. I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and an active and proud member of New York City Atheists. And those two organizations are producing and presenting this program each week, which takes a look at famous atheists throughout history, according to their birth or death dates, when they were born or when they died, or also important court decisions or bonfires when heretics were burned, or other important in the history of atheism. We're in the middle of March, and let's call it the third week in March, and let's start off with one of the most important men in American history, James Madison. Who is probably more responsible for both the U.S. Constitution and the subsequent Bill of Rights that was added to the Constitution than anyone else among the Founding Fathers. He was born March 16th in 1751, and in Virginia, of course, like most of the Founding Fathers. He was a deist who might not be called an atheist per se, but he was called an atheist by the religious folk of his time. After graduating from Princeton, the College of New Jersey, as it was called then, Madison was appointed a delegate to the Virginia State Convention, and there he was responsible for the adoption of a Virginia statute that became the model for our later First Amendment. It's a freedom of conscience clause in the state constitution. Religious bondage, he wrote at the time, shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. After being elected to the state legislature, his famous Memorial and Remonstrance defeated a bid to force mandatory tithing in 1785. Now, at that time, in America and in most of Western civilization, it was considered absolutely normal for local governments or even national governments to tax people of every religion for the support of the clergy of the particular state-supported religion. And the other delegates to the Virginia legislature just thought it was the most normal thing in the world to support the clergy, in this case, the Episcopal clergy in Virginia. Madison wrote the Memorial and Remonstrance to end forced mandatory tithing. He warned, "It is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties." First experiment on our liberties being religion. He was elected to the first U.S. House of Representatives, was Secretary of State under Jefferson, and served 2 terms as president, the 4th president of the United States, from 1809 to 1817. The Congress passed, while he was president, the Congress passed a bill appointing chaplains to the 2 houses of Congress. Madison called it a palpable violation of equal rights as well as constitutional principles, but he could not. His veto would be overturned. He argued against chaplains in the military as well, and religious proclamations by the president for Thanksgiving. He wrote most famously, and I love this, from the Memorial and Remonstrance in 1785. He wrote, what he was doing, let me backtrack a moment, what he was doing was he was arguing against the establishment of any religion in Virginia. And he wrote, during almost 15 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial. What have been its fruits? More or less in all places, pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. Torrents of blood have been spilled in the old world by vain attempts of the secular arm to extinguish religious discord by prescribing all difference in religious opinion. 15 centuries of pride, indolence, ignorance, and servility. That was our fourth president, James Madison. He may not have called himself an atheist, but welcome to the club, Jimmy. In the late 19th century, in Wisconsin, some Roman Catholic parents realized that their children were being read Bible passages 2 or 3 times a day by their teachers in the public schools. What were the Roman Catholic parents, what made them so angry? That the Bible that they were being read from was the King James Bible, which of course the Catholic parents considered heresy, and if not actual words of the devil. So they sued in the Wisconsin courts to end Bible reading in the schools. So this little bit of, let's call it intramural fighting between a couple of different Christian denominations became the basis of one of the most important court decisions in American history, Weiss versus District Board. The Supreme Court of Wisconsin on March 18, 1890, ruled that Bible readings and devotionals in public schools were unconstitutional. The Supreme Court of Wisconsin, of course, is not the Supreme Court of the United States, but the findings of that court were referred to over and over again in federal court decisions, all leading up to the huge changes in what the schools could say and do regarding religion in the 1940s and 50s. Justice H.S. Horton of the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, in a concurring opinion in that Weiss versus District Board decision, wrote, "There is no such source and cause of strife, quarrel, fights, malignant opposition, persecution, and war, and all evil in the state as religion. Let it once enter our civil affairs, our government would soon be destroyed. Let it once enter our common schools, they would be destroyed. Those who made our Constitution saw this and used the most apt and comprehensive language in it to prevent such a catastrophe." Justice Horton had James Madison very much in mind when he wrote that. From the political realm to psychology. The most famous behavioral psychologist of the 20th century, and maybe arguably the father of behavioral psychology, is B.F. Skinner. He was born on March 20th, in 1904 in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, and grew up in what he called a warm and stable family. He wrote in his autobiography, "My grandmother Skinner made sure that I understood the concept of hell by showing me the glowing bed of coals in the parlor stove. In a traveling magician's show, I saw a devil complete with horns and bobbed tail, and I lay awake all that night in an agony of fear." Miss Graves, one of his teachers, though a devout Christian, was liberal. She explained, for example, that one might interpret the miracles in the Bible as figures of speech. Within a year, I had gone to Miss Graves to tell her that I no longer believed in God. "I know," she said. "I've been through that myself." But her strategy misfired. I never went through it. B.F. Skinner went on through Hamilton College and Harvard and teaching at the University of Minnesota to become chairman of the psychology department at Indiana University in 1945, then was recruited back to Harvard, where he stayed the rest of his life. Many of his psychological experiments, research with rats and other small animals, brought him international fame. His most famous book, Walden II, which he published in 1948, described an egalitarian communal lifestyle. He attended one of his daughter's math classes, and he realized there's something basically wrong, from his point of view, with classical and traditional teaching methods. And he became convinced that teaching methods should proceed by small steps, where students get feedback before advancing to the next level or questions. And he proposed a method comparable to tutoring children one-on-one. It's an ideal system, and in practical terms, it can't be implemented unless you're a child of very rich parents. But his ideas have become incorporated. They've had influence on educational theory ever since. B.F. Skinner, born March 20th in 1904, and one of our idols. Think, if you will, of the 19th century illustrated books like The Illustrated Mother Goose, Under the Window, Birthday Book, The Language of Flowers. These charming little books which you and I have, most of us have not seen, but if you saw the illustrations for them, you would instantly recognize them. These detailed, beautiful little books that seem to come from fairyland. Kate Greenaway was the illustrator, and she, as a matter of fact, the most prestigious medal for illustrations in children's books that has been given for the last 70 or 80 years is called the Kate Greenaway Medal. But Kate Greenaway was a lifelong atheist, and a militant one. And her delicate watercolors of children wearing simple, timeless frocks, landscapes and flowers are classics that you and I would recognize instantly today. But she wrote in a letter to her biographers, "It is strange beyond anything I can think to be able to believe in any of the known religions." Kate Greenaway, born March 17, 1846. She lived to 1901. her illustrations live on, and her opinions are still around today. From an illustrator of delicate, fanciful children's books to a hero or anti-hero of tough guy action movies. Let's turn to Bruce Willis. Born March 19th in 1955. He's a tough guy, hero of action movies, probably because he had a tough guy early adulthood. He grew up in ordinary circumstances, but he worked hard in New York as a waiter and a bartender, and was typecast for one of his first roles as a bartender when he was spotted by a director. He became famous for the the television series Moonlighting, then the whole Die Hard series of tough guy movies, and a whole lot of others, most of which are familiar to most of the people watching this show. However, he was interviewed for George magazine in 1998 and said, organized religions in general, in my opinion, are dying forms. My opinion too, by the way. They were all very important when we didn't know why the sun moved, why weather changed, why hurricanes occurred, or volcanoes happened. Modern religion is the entrail of modern mythology. But there are people who interpret the Bible literally. Literally. I choose not to believe that's the way. And that's what makes America cool, you know? Bruce Willis. I love that phrase. Modern religion is the entrail of modern mythology. Interesting point of view. Bruce Willis. Still very much with us. Let's see, who else have I got here? On March 17th in 1832, Moncure Daniel Conway was born into a conservative, pro-slavery Virginia family. Now, he's not someone we would know very well, but Moncure Daniel Conway is a pretty good example of the changing attitudes of his time and of the mid to late 19th century. From a pro-slavery Virginia family and a Methodist upbringing, which turned him into a Methodist at an early age, Conway drifted towards abolitionism and Unitarianism. Unitarians, of course, don't necessarily believe in God at all, and but they leave the idea open. And he became a major proselytizer for Thomas Paine, who had been rejected by the American public. Paine, who had been a hero to the American public for his tract Common Sense, which supported the American Revolution, but then damned as an atheist for the Age of Reason, and for decades after Paine's death, he was in disfavor as that atheist Paine. Conway became an agnostic and revitalized the name and the reputation of Paine. He fought against the American War with Spain of 1898, which at the time everybody thought was a glorious cause, and we all realize now was a terrible example of American imperialism at its worst. In writing about his childhood, He wrote, "Sunday was a day of just so much external restraint as public opinion absolutely demanded. I learned at last, as I came to be about 17, that my father was an entire free thinker, as much as I am now. It shocked me much, because he never taught me anything, allowed me to pick up religion from anyone around me, and then scolded me because I embraced beliefs which he knew must condemn him. I think this neglect to be honest with children is a terrible evil. I have lost years of thought and wandered wide and done such unwise, conceited things and encountered risks for soul and body, all of which might have been obviated by his frank teaching." That, when I was researching all these people that we discuss here on this program, that little excerpt came home to me, because I have had people say to me, "But you haven't taught your children atheism, have you?" "You betcha I have." And just as Monsieur Daniel Conway regretted the fact that his father didn't pass on his own free-thinking beliefs to him, I have made sure that I have passed on mine to my kids, and they to their kids. So I'm proud to say that I have 4 atheist children and 8 atheist grandchildren, or at least they're growing up atheists, and I'm very pleased with that. That's pretty much it for this week in atheist history. And what have we discussed? We've talked about the 4th President of the United States, James Madison, who was a very definite free thinker, who is responsible for the separation of church and state in America that we are still defending today. And an outgrowth of Madison's kind of thinking, the Weiss versus District Board decision of 1890 in Wisconsin, which said that children could not be required to attend Bible readings and devotionals in public school. In fact, as a matter of fact, they could not be done. Those Bible readings and devotionals were ruled unconstitutional by the Wisconsin Supreme Court in 1890. We took a look at the thinking and the writings of B.F. Skinner, the leading psychologist, behavioral psychologist of the 20th century. We took a look also at the atheist opinion of Kate Greenaway, the one of the most famous illustrators of children's books, and whose name is on the medal that is the most prestigious medal that is given for illustration of children's books each year. Bruce Willis, the tongue-in-cheek action hero of so many movies, is an atheist. And Monsieur Daniel Conway, up until this minute, obscure 19th century American abolitionist and free thinker, who gave us who teaches us the lesson that atheists have just as much right as theists to pass on their opinions to their own children and raise them as free thinkers. That's it for this week in atheist history. I hope you'll tune in again next week when we'll be talking about the important dates at the end of March. We're going to talk about 2 important free-thinking poets, Robert Frost and A.E. Housman, about an American diplomat who helped change the course of American history, and about 2 of the most prominent of what is being called the New Atheists, Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins. Going to be a fact-filled week next week. I hope you'll tune in. I'm John Rafferty. Thank you for watching tonight.
Whatever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation. and a Hindu nation and a nation of non-believers.